Okay, someone was asking me for some details on how I have these things set up earlier, and I thought that it was a good opportunity to do version 3 of this setup, or 4 or 5, I think. But definitely the third video in which I address the idea specifically of using these cheap eBay and Amazon grid tie inverters with wind turbines and how I make it work. Now, I want to point out right at the beginning, these types of inverters are not UL rated. They, to basically summing it up, if you're using these inverters and your house burns down and it's linked in any way to those whatsoever, you're on your own. Insurance won't cover it. You'll be out your expenses. I'm using these, but I'm in a very isolated building using them. I have an isolated system, so there's quite a bit of buffer between my house and where this stuff is used. Use at your own risk. Now, the initial problem that I had with these things, a couple of years ago, what I wanted to do is just run my turbine straight to it, because at the end of the day, what my goal is this number right here. I want to see how much power my wind turbines kick out over time. I'm not charging batteries per se. I am just trying to burn everything off. What I'd hoped to do at the very beginning was hook my wind turbine up to one of these inverters and just go with it. The problem that I had is that these inverters, they have a very narrow input range. There, on this one is 20 to 45 volts, and these are 22 to 50 volts. I have gone through quite a few of both of these types of inverters. I have them littered all over my shop in pieces up there, and I have found that these ones that operate on the 20 to 45 volt range, these tend to be better. These ones tend to blow up more. Now, the issue initially hooking these things up to my wind turbines is my wind turbines will exceed that voltage really, really quickly. These inverters are not fast enough to where they can really grab it. And even whenever they do, like if the turbine's moving slow enough that it's inside that operating voltage, the inverter just shuts it down. It just stops it. And then whenever the wind's coming enough to overpower that, it just goes right over the top. So the way I had to address this was with batteries. And I have slowly increased the number of batteries over and over again to where I finally got a point to where my stuff is stable. The way I have this arranged is my wind turbines, I'm more or less using the wind turbines to charge the battery banks. And then the battery banks, it immediately goes from that through these switches to my inverters. That way I'm still burning off all of that power, but the batteries keep the voltage regulated enough to where I can, where these inverters can grab it. Now, this arrangement, I have two different setups down here. I have these 4 rows of batteries over here are set up in a 48 volt bank. This 2 rows here are 24 volts. I have my I-1500 that's going to this meter here. I have the leads from the output on that one, which are these 2 here, going straight down to these terminals. These terminals are what feed off of this bank. I have the positive side, and that's going to be the same across all of these. I have the positive lead goes straight to the positive input on my inverter. The negative lead goes up to the solid state relay right here. This relay I am controlling with this voltage switch. This voltage switch, you can get these out of the States for, I think they're $30, $35, and it takes a few days to get them to you if you're in the United States. I ordered these ones directly from China, though, and they cost about $10 or $11 that way, but it takes a couple of weeks to get them. Now, I have this switch operating this relay. Whenever you have these set up, oops, that's the fun thing about the Chinese ones. Sometimes the display works. That is my high voltage. This, whenever my battery voltage, which is basically, the battery bank is not big enough, so the turbine does overpower it. Whenever the battery voltage gets up to 26.9 volts, it turns this relay on, which connects the negative feed to this inverter. And it will run until I get down to 24.5 volts. That's the bottom limit on this. At 24.5 volts, it shuts off this relay, shuts off the inverter. Each of these are set up the same way. Now, this is the inadvisable part generally. If you're going to try and use inverters like this, you should do 24 volt turbines. Unfortunately for me, I have 24 volt and 48 volt turbines. So my 48 volt bank here, that's where my Healy is going to, and ultimately it's where everything is going to. I'm going to have everything going to 48 volt banks. I mean, everything's going to be 48 volts. My Healy, that's these two leads here, goes down to this arrangement. Now, it's kind of hard to see through all the spaghetti back there, but I've got those four terminals, positive, negative, positive, negative. Those are off of each 24 volt set of batteries. And I have a jumper right here in the middle, which lets me pull 48 volts between this terminal and that terminal. That's feeding off of the entire bank down there, all four of those rows. My Healy feeds all four of those batteries. Now, like I've said, these inverters, they won't work off of 48 volt turbines. You can see my static voltage for that bank right now is 50 volts. Excuse me. My static voltage right now is 50 volts at rest for this bank. 50 volts is this inverter might grab it, but it also might not. We're right at the top. Those two 45 volt inverters, that's just not going to work for those. So I have the positive off of this bank, or off of these two batteries here, this 24 volt set going to this inverter, and then the positive off of that 24 volt set going to that inverter, and then the negatives from those are going to these two relays here. These relays, it's operated just like my 24 volt setup over here. Whenever these get up to 26.9, wait, did I do that the same? No, push the wrong button. Yeah, 26.9. Okay, good. 26.9 on the high side on both of these, 24.5 on the low side on both of them. Whenever they get up to 26.9, it turns on both of these inverters. Whenever they get down to 24.5, it turns them off. Now, I will still have to play with this a little bit because this inverter pulls, this one pulls harder than that one. So my batteries end up a little imbalanced whenever it's running. I will probably swap those two around or something. I'll figure that out. That's playing that I've got to do to tune it. But that's how I have that set up for right now. And it does seem to work. It seems to work pretty well. This is what I'm talking about with the cheap switches. Let's turn that off. Oh. There we go. Well, crud. Yeah, I'll figure it out later. Okay, so anyway, like I said, this is What I found that actually allows me to use these inverters without blowing the inverters up, I stay well within the voltage range of the inverters. I am not blowing up my batteries. I've with the smaller the number of batteries you have, the harder it hits them. The harder the turbines are on the batteries, and the harder these inverters are on the batteries. Right now, with 18 of them, it seems to be working pretty well. Haven't blown up a battery in weeks, months by now. And I also I did have a storm take out a couple of my inverters, but that was a different thing. We've had several really windy days in the last couple of weeks, and they held up to that just fine, running it this way. So I think this is good. Again, this is what I'm using to burn off the power that I make. If you're trying to store your power, you will probably need to have, well, I mean, you'll have to have another switch arrangement that goes to something that's going to break your turbines, that will slow them down whenever your batteries are full. Get a couple of resistors. A lot of people talk about getting DC heating elements to run a hot water heater, that kind of thing. So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to use these inverters. It would work with any kind of load. But, be careful with it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to post them. I'm always interested in questions and comments. And thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day, guys.